Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I wanted to show you how to make my favorite kind of bail. If you don't know what a bail is the portion of a pendant that the chain goes through and that you can hang the pendant with. And the type that I make I think looks pretty classy. I first saw it in a store somewhere and I thought, well, I could probably make that pretty easily. And so ever since, that's generally the kind of bail that I put on things, unless I'm putting a tube or something. So I was going to show you how to make those today. They're pretty easy. So you finished your pendant and you want to put a bail on it, but you don't want to put a jump ring on it because that looks just so plain and boring. So I'm going to show you how to make a little bail that I think looks pretty classy. Actually, two variations of it. One is super simple, one is not too hard. So either way, you've probably seen these before. If you take a piece of sheet, that, you have the lines like this, like that, and just cut it out and then curve it around into kind of a teardrop shape. You can run the tips of these through this thing here, solder them together, and then you have a nice little bail. So we're going to do something like that, except we're going to actually put a little lip on the edge here instead, and I'm going to use some of this, I believe this is 22 gauge sterling wire. So before I do that, I'm going to cut two pieces of this that are slightly longer than the piece of sheet that I'm using. And generally for pendants I like to make relatively big bails because a lot of people like to use thicker chains when they wear them, and I remember buying jewelry for my wife in the past and having trouble finding chains that would fit through the bails that they put on there, so that was kind of frustrating. So I'm just straightening these little pieces of wire out. They have to be perfect, but pretty straight. Okay. And then I'll find the general center of these. Close enough. And I'm going to make these into little chevron shapes where they have kind of a bend in the middle like this. So they kind of fit together like that. Try to make the bend pretty much the same so they're symmetrical. That's close. So let's see how it looks when I put it on here. It's hard to pick these little wires up. I think that's pretty good. We'll just line it up like that. Now the issue with these is when we solder these down, if I lean pieces of solder against this wire, it's probably going to make big puddles and then leave kind of messy patches that I have to clean up later. That's kind of a pain in the butt to do. So I'm actually going to sweat solder some solder onto these wires so it has less chance of spreading out very far when I solder it down. The sweat soldering is where you pre-melt some solder into a place where it needs to be before you actually solder it, the piece itself into place. So I'm going to cut some little tiny pieces of hard silver solder here. This is one of those situations where pick soldering comes in super handy. So I got a whole bunch of little pieces here. Flex these wires. I'm going to throw him up here too so I can just flex him right now. Pick one up, heat this thing, solder to the wire. Solder to the wire. Solder to the wire. Solder to the wire. People, when they first learn to do this, have a tendency to melt these little fine wires. I still occasionally do when I'm not paying too good of attention. But just a little bit more on this one. Okay. So move this a little bit closer here. Line these guys up. We'll just have to. The only risk here is the wires are much smaller than the sheet, and so they're vulnerable up on top. And in order to get both of them up to 1450 degrees, you have to kind of almost avoid the wires and focus on the sheet with the tip of the flame, because the wires being up on top will be exposed pretty readily to the heat, and you can melt them if you're not careful. You want to bring it up slowly. And you can usually see the seam forming when it starts to flow along the edge there, and I try to look to make sure it goes along the whole length. And that's all there is to that part. Snip off if there's any ends of the wire sticking off here. And then I'll just use my shears to cut it down to flush with the wire on the sheet. And then I'll just have to use the bastard file to clean up that edge so it looks like a single piece. Okay, so now you have a kind of a elongated diamond shape with a lip on it. And I usually use the bail making pliers to make this portion shape. I'll put it around the bigger part there and just kind of pull it around it like that. See, it forms kind of a teardrop shape. The last thing you have to deal with here is soldering this on over a jump ring or whatever kind of way you've decided to connect it to this. So I'm going to put it through there like that, but getting these guys to stay together is they're always going to spring back like that. So in order to get those two touching, you need to bend the bail in the middle a little bit, like make a sharp bend that way, flip it over to the other side, and make a sharp bend that way. You're kind of taking these two pieces and going like that. So, and that forces these two ends together. Then you can pick solder them just by setting it up right like this. I'll make sure I have some solder on the pad there. I probably ought to cut a little bigger piece just to be safe. The nice thing about doing this part is you don't have to heat this part of the pendant because this is a separate piece, and normally with silver you have to heat the entire thing in order to get it up to the soldering temperature you want, but since we're just doing a separate piece here, we just have to heat the bail. Fill my flex bottle here pretty soon. So I'll just pick up a piece of solder here. Bring this a little bit. I'm going to throw one more on there just to be safe. I would like to make sure it is strong. Okay. Should have a nice little pendant with a bail that's separate that gives it a nice movement when it's hanging from a chain. And so that's pretty much how you do it. Alright, well that's how you make my favorite type of bail. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, would you like the video? And please, if you want more such information like this and videos that are relevant to this particular topic, subscribe to my channel and let others know about it, and share this video with others. Thanks again, and happy silversmithing.